Hey guys, Derek here from A Guy, Girl, in a Camper Van. So Paula's away for the day, which means I've got the place to myself, and as usual in those situations, I've also figured out a bit of a project for me to work on. See, a couple weeks ago we were over at Paula's parents, and the whole family was there to help them rake up their leaves to get ready for the winter. And by the time we were done, it took us about 2 hours, we had raked their entire huge lawn. They've got a bunch of maple trees, so we had a massive pile of leaves that we raked off into the forest. I remember thinking while we were working on this that, man, all these leaves would be really good mulch for our massive gardens. But unfortunately, it would be really hard to transport all the leaves here. They don't like to stay in the back of a truck whenever all that wind's blowing. And so, unfortunately, that wasn't going to be an option. But it did also get me thinking about our own yard. Because we've got a pretty big one, and we have a lot of trees. So why don't we just rake up all of our own leaves and use that for the garden? Well, unfortunately, we've got a couple problems with that. Let me explain. So first of all, we've got this pretty big field adjacent to our backyard, which means that we get a pretty awesome cross breeze most of the time. That's a really good thing for whenever you're dealing with mosquitoes and black flies and stuff like that in the rest of the year, but it's not that great for collecting a bunch of leaves on the yard. As you can see, there are certainly leaves here, but it's not the huge piles of leaves like her parents had. And so it would take a pretty long time to rake up enough leaves from this lawn in order to be able to make much of a dent on our mulch needs. The other problem is that there's only two of us and we don't have an entire family to come on over and give us a hand. Though I'm sure they'd be willing, it's still a lot of work and I don't really want to have to put other people out like that if we're able to avoid it. But luckily, there's another spot on our property with an abundance of leaves all concentrated into one narrow strip, so we wouldn't need 5 or 6 people to be able to rake them up. Come on, I'll show you. So here we are out in the forest, where obviously there's an abundance of trees, and if you look below them, there's an abundance of leaves as well. Tons of organic material that would be just perfect if it was chopped up and thrown on our gardens. But it's pretty hard to rake in there, obviously. So that's not the narrow strip I was talking about. The narrow strip is the trail that I've been meticulously maintaining all summer. And if you look at it, it's completely covered in leaves. And the great thing about using all the leaves from our trail is that our trail travels through our entire forest. And our forest contains a pretty amazing diversity of tree species. And with so much diversity in the trees, each with their own nutritional requirements, it seems to make sense that they would put different types of nutrients into their leaves as well. Which in turn means that with a diverse spectrum of leaves going into our mulch, we should be putting in a much more diverse spectrum of nutrients into our food supply as well. I don't actually have any science to back that up, but diversity sure seems to work well for nature. And for us right now, I mean, that's kind of the point. If you've seen our previous videos about hugelkulture and permaculture, right now we are doing our best to try and emulate nature. We're trying to observe what happens naturally in the forest, in our field, and try and replicate that in our garden. And besides, science isn't just something that's done in a lab or read about in a textbook. Science in its truest, most basic sense is all about getting your hands dirty, trying stuff. Make a guess about what might happen if you did something based on stuff you already know, and then experiment with it. See if you're right. And if you are right, then make another guess and build on it and keep building and share that information so that other people can try it too. So I guess that's sort of what I'm doing. It might look like I'm just going for a walk in the woods, but no, I'm doing science. But like I said, science is all about getting your hands dirty, so I should probably stop talking about picking up all these leaves and figure out a way to actually do it. So the most obvious way to collect a whole bunch of leaves and move them around is with a leaf rake. That's what we did at Paula's parents, and it worked out really well. But there's a bit of a difference between their yard and our trail. First of all, our trail is about 2 kilometers long. That's a really long way to be pushing a bunch of leaves around with one of these things. So the next obvious option is to use a leaf bagger on the back of our riding lawnmower. That way we just have to drive over the leaves, it picks them up, puts them into the bag behind the tractor, and we're good to go. We just dump it on the garden. But once again, we have a problem. So the main problem with using a leaf bagger on the back of our lawnmower is that Well, quite simply, we don't have a leaf bagger for the back of our lawnmower. And if we wanted to buy one, they are crazy expensive. I looked at new ones and they're about $500 or $600, and I can't find any cheap used ones right now. So that's not really an option. But even if it was, there's another problem with leaf baggers in that they don't really hold that many leaves. They're fine for a small yard, but for a 2-kilometer trail, we would have to dump it probably like 40 times. And that's just gonna take too much work. So there's gotta be a better way. The concept behind leaf collecting with a lawnmower is pretty simple. Essentially, the leaves blow out of this chute from the mower deck whenever you mow over top of them, and then they travel up a tube and into 2 or 3 bags that hang behind the lawnmower. Once they get filled, you take those bags and you empty them somewhere where you want to put all those leaves. And with such a simple concept, I figure there's got to be a really easy way that we can build a setup like this completely by ourselves. But there's no sense in reinventing the wheel, so let's first check the internet and see if anybody else has thought of this. So yeah, it's definitely a thing online. Oh, internet, I love you. So there were a lot of really varied options online, but one of the things that they all had in common was that there was some sort of rigid interface right here between the mower deck and then typically a flexible tube that could be bent towards whatever kind of collection device you're using behind. So I just took a quick trip to the hardware store and I picked up 2 things. First of all, I've got this 6-inch diameter pipe. It was in the heating and cooling section. It's usually used for ductwork for your furnace or whatever. It is 30 inches or 2.5 feet long. And I also got this piece of flexible aluminum pipe. This is also used for ventilation, so I picked it up in the same section. It's 6 inches in diameter, and it stretches out, believe it or not, to 8 feet long. So this can be directed wherever you want it to, and it's really easy to work with. So the basic idea here is to take the rigid pipe and essentially attach it to the mower deck, kind of like that. And then this section over here, you can see that it's been crimped. That is so that the flexible pipe can easily fit over top of it. This is gonna be nice and rigid so that make sure that the flexible pipe never hits the wheel or anything like that. And I can make sure that wherever I initially direct it is where it stays. And then the flexible pipe will come from here, and then I'm gonna try a couple of different options for where to direct it into behind the tractor. So the first step is gonna be figuring out how to attach that pipe to the mower deck. So if I lift up this chute, it's just on a bit of a spring. It wants to shoot down. But luckily they added in this metal piece here that if you kind of slide it up, it then catches and will hold up the chute. A lot of the people seem to actually remove the chute completely, but you can see here that this blade is completely exposed to this opening, and that pipe isn't too thick. So if I were to accidentally step on it or something like that, that sounds pretty dangerous. So I think I'm going to first attempt to leave this chute here as some sort of a guard, just in case. So now for some eyeball measurements and cutting away of excess material. Check the fit on the tractor a couple times, make some adjustments, and then... So now about 20 minutes and Band-Aid later, this is what I've come up with. Not that pretty. But it's not supposed to be pretty. It's supposed to work. And with that in mind, now comes the time to attach it to the tractor. Alright, so this might just be the least professional thing I've ever done, but again, it doesn't have to look pretty and it's not going to be there permanently. It's only going to be used for about a day or maybe 2. So, here's what I've done. I've used duct tape to attach this pipe onto the mower deck. Kind of looks like hell, but if you look down the pipe, you can see that there is a perfect channel now directly from the mower deck, from the blades, out to where the flexible pipe is going to attach, and then out here to wherever we collect the leaves. Alright, so now I've got the rigid pipe duct taped onto the flexible pipe, and as you can see, it extends out pretty far, and this isn't even fully extended yet. So now I just got to figure out something to actually direct the leaves into for collection. But before we figure out how to collect these leaves, let's make sure that leaves actually shoot out of this pipe at all. right, so that wasn't perfect. Some leaves did shoot out of the bottom of the deck, but honestly, for something that took me like 20 minutes to make, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's get collecting. So this is the first prototype for actually collecting the leaves, but I can tell already that I don't think this is gonna quite work. Let me show you what I mean. So once again, we've got the pipe coming out of here, but I've got it directed now into the dump cart, which I tow behind the tractor. I've just got it, once again, stuck on here with some duct tape. But unfortunately, the pipe, though it is able to stretch out 8 feet, I think that's only whenever you stretch it out in a straight line. Once you start adding curves to it, this corrugated section in here actually started to kind of pull apart a bit. So I had to tape around it with more duct tape, and that stopped it from being able to stretch out to its full length. So it just barely reaches here, and though I think it will shoot leaves in, I don't think that they're gonna stay in. I think they're probably just gonna all blow out. Plus, as soon as I turn a corner and this trailer gets pulled this way, it's going to stretch this further than it's able to go, and I think it's going to break apart. But just for the purposes of checking to see if this method will, have any kind of merit, I'm going to drive it in a straight line just to see what happens, and then we'll take it from there. So unfortunately, as I expected, this did not really work. This just shoots out with too much force, and maybe if I had some walls on this, some taller walls, and maybe like a top on it or something, that might work to actually hold them in, but as it stands, they're just flying all out as soon as I shoot them in. Plus, as you can see, unfortunately, this pipe did break, even when driving in as straight of a line as I could. There's just too much pressure on this stuff, and the corrugation just peels right apart. If I was using either a rigid pipe or some kind of a plastic pipe that wasn't just sort of wrapped together like this one is, then I think that this would, have a lot more likelihood of success. But as it stands, this isn't going to work for me. I'm going to have to try something different. All right, so I stand corrected. This is the least professional thing I've ever done. So on here we've got some scrap wood that I've attached to the trailer hitch, and it was still a little bit wobbly, so I also added on some of this baler twine that ties up here into the 2 corners. It basically just is there to keep it from moving around too much. And onto this guy, I'm going to attach a nice big tarp that I'm going to turn into a bit of a bag. And then this pipe will go over this and into the tarp bag. And then the tarp is simply going to drag behind the tractor like so. Will it work? Let's find out. And here we go. I took this huge tarp, I folded it in 3, and then used some duct tape to tape it into this sort of a tube shape that's kind of closed at this end. The theory is that as everything blows from the tube into the tarp, this will probably start to fill up with air, which will allow a lot of the leaves to blow this way, and these gaps here at the end will allow just enough of the air to blow out in order to keep everything moving. It's all held together with duct tape, and the tarp unfortunately was a little wet, which means the tape isn't sticking all that well. So, if I was a betting man, I think I'd probably have to bet that this isn't going to work very well. But I'm going to give it a shot anyway. So now it's time for a test drive, but before I take this thing out into the trail and potentially get it stuck out there, I figure I'll try it in the backyard first. And the sun's starting to go down, which means Paula's going to be home soon, so I better hurry up. So, that actually didn't work too bad. And conveniently, the tarp actually has a couple of these big holes in it. And so whenever we look inside, you can see that we are collecting quite a few leaves in there. But unfortunately, it looks like this tube's already starting to clog up a little bit, probably due to the fairly extreme curve right here and the fact that it's only 6 inches in diameter. I think an 8 or even a 10-inch tube would have worked better, but I couldn't find any of those at the hardware store. So I think I'll probably just clean out the tube, maybe make a few adjustments, and then I'll take it for a spin around the trail and see what we get. Okay, so here are the adjustments I made. I moved the entire thing this way a little bit so that I could straighten out this pipe a lot more. So now you can see it's a much more gentle curve coming in here. And I took it for another spin and it didn't clog up yet. We've got a whole bunch of leaves in there now. So I'm pretty anxious to take this out on the trail, but unfortunately it's pretty much dark now and Paula's gonna be home any minute. So I guess I will have to wait till the morning. See you then. Morning everyone. It's another gorgeous day out today and I've been waiting all night to get this thing out in the woods, so no more stalling, let's do this. Okay, so that did work. We definitely picked up some leaves. Let's take a look in the tarp bag. You can see quite a few leaves in there now. Pretty thick. But unfortunately, it keeps clogging. I've already clogged it twice since I've been out here, and that's only been about 5 or 10 minutes. So this isn't the most efficient way to pick up leaves for sure. I think once again the problem is this 6-inch diameter pipe. It just isn't quite wide enough to be able to allow the flow of leaves through it, especially right now while they are unfortunately a little bit damp out here. So if I were to do this again, I would probably want to upgrade this to an 8-inch pipe, and I think I would also ditch this corrugated stuff. It just grabs the leaves a little bit too much, and even with this relatively gentle curve on here now, it just keeps getting plugged up right about there. Maybe even change the angle where it comes out of the chute here. This angle is good to make sure that we have a good throw of the leaves, but it's not good to avoid this curve as it comes behind the tractor. So I think the ultimate conclusion here is that while the concept is good, my execution was not. I definitely need some larger diameter pipes, and I think with a little bit more time and another trip to a different hardware store, I think I could probably get this going pretty well. But unfortunately, I already spent the better part of my day yesterday working on this, and I probably shouldn't do the same thing today. So I think now I'll take my lessons learned and I'll revisit this next fall. But luckily, Paula's here now, and as usual, she came up with a fun way to save the day. Ready for plan B?
Ready.